We're going to see if we screech. And if we screech, I'm going to have to try to be a technical person, which is a scary sight.
All right, we will open up today's the May 30th meeting, council budget workshop. All of council is present, and we're moving on to the departmental operating and capital fire, EMS, and hazmat. And sunset is at 8:12 today, so we'll try and stop around 8.
I don't think you'll hear any complaints about earlier. So, are you ready for me to? We are prepared tonight. We'll do whatever you'd like, but we're prepared tonight to talk about public safety. And for the town of Orono, that actually includes 3 different departmental budgets. Public safety, which is general administration, police, fire, and hazmat. When you look at the overall budget, this is where the majority of that $340,000 increase in operating expense lives, is in public safety. Because both chiefs and I have been in front of council multiple times as part of collective bargaining and executive session this spring, I thought I'd just take a minute to try to recap what I think council already knows, just so the record reflects kind of where we are. In public safety right now, recruitment and retention of highly skilled professional employees is very difficult. The market is shifting on us. We are seeing base wages increase substantially, as we also see the requirement for more training and greater risk to the town. The risk to the town grows with this particular type of service that we are offering, both police and fire. So what your proposed operating budget reflects is a 1.7% increase in wages for the fire department. That is an agreement that we've reached. We have not finished our collective bargaining, but we have agreed on FY19 wages and benefits. So that is in this budget. But channeling my inner Councillor Gardner, I will tell you that this is a stutter step to a pretty substantial change coming in the way fire services are delivered. And we are looking at this cost is going to escalate over the next 3 years. We're keeping it low this year, but there will be increases coming. It also reflects the agreed upon ratified contract with the Maine Association of Police Orono Unit, which council we've been through already. What was important to understand is to come to average market. We increased salaries by approximately 4% overall as average, because they ended up compressing a pay scale. So you'll see some of that additional cost in this budget. We are not running a luxurious service over there. There is not a lot of room to find savings, and what you're actually seeing are increases, and I would say they're due to 2 different things. Well, 3. That was really good music. One is the payroll cost, the cost of wages and benefits. The second is the costs associated with equipment and properly staffing, especially in the fire department. We really, one of the things that Jeff has pointed out during his 1 year here is that we were finding cost savings in places that probably were not the smartest places to find those savings. And so what this budget reflects is adequately staffing for the response. And some of that is additional training. Some of that is additional materials to have at the fire station. For example, medical supplies, on-scene supplies, we have the expense regardless of whether or not we budget for it. We have not been staffing the way we should. So we now, this budget reflects that. Our equipment is getting older, and with older equipment comes more costly repairs, and in the public safety world, unfortunately, it's all specialized repairs. When a pump goes down, you're going to a specialized place to get it fixed. And it has to get fixed because, as we've experienced in Orono, even with great community partners and other fire departments helping us out, there are not extra engines and ladder trucks to go around. So we've put money in to reflect the trend that we are seeing with equipment repair. And then the last piece, right or wrong, we have seen legal expenses skyrocketing in both departments. And I would, in the past, we've said, oh, it was just this year, or it was bargaining, and we'll pull it back down. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is trend, and that trend, I think, lives in two places. The first is when you're hiring staff and you're having to deal with a very high stress, high expectation environment, we are seeing more need to bring in the town attorney and medical providers to help us when our employees are having problems. So that is going up. I think part of it is that we are becoming more responsive to a need that's probably always been there. And the other is when we hire new people who maybe have never worked in the workforce before, and they now are working in the workforce, there's sometimes rubs about what work expectations are reasonable and what aren't, and we're finding more, while the relationships with the unions are better than ever, I would say the need to call upon that relationship is greater than ever. So what you see in this budget also are some escalations for we don't anticipate. The other piece that the police department's having to deal with are creative attorneys with the creative methods to try to get cases dismissed early, and they're trying to go directly to the town to subpoena information, which we have to defend the town in those subpoenas because oftentimes they're asking for information by law give. So that is kind of my general increase, and I'll talk about where the increases are. I will say I could have probably comfortably added even more to both of these budgets. Talking with the chiefs, I think this will meet the need. There is definitely no fluff unless we want to change things we do in the community. So that would be my 2 cents. Is that all right? Okay. So both chiefs are here, ready to talk about their budgets. I know you guys have done a great job this year of reading the material and have great questions. We were kind of hoping we could start with public safety, move to fire, because public safety and fire are more closely tied in conversation this year, and then hazmat and police. Yes, Josh got the short stick on that one.
I think he won last year.
I think so.
There you go.
So you mean public safety administration is
Yep.
the first thing?
So that would be 2020.
Okay. So anyone have questions on that? Public safety administration? I had a question in just the current methods. It says that we develop and maintain the department's social media presence. I thought we had a new person that was doing that.
So we have a new person that's doing the town community and development. Social media and public safety is most often done internally to each department because there's so much information that cannot go. It's a lot easier to have somebody who is well versed in that information to make that happen. I think what that reflects is the police department has kind of been our test with public safety. Jeff's hope is to begin to launch that in fire in the coming year. But we had just the sergeant and Josh doing the Facebook and website posting, and we've added that responsibility also to Jessica so that it doesn't go when the sergeant's working, there's a lot of stuff, and then nothing.
So maybe you could speak, the big change in that department is the change to a full-time salary for the administrative assistant, right? Who previously had been shared with community development.
So what last year with this budget, we had one full-time person in that department. And she did some support for fire, mostly around ambulance billing, EMS receivables, helping with the BZ contract, that kind of thing. Most everything else she does, except for waiting on people to come through the door, which could be police or fire, is police driven. So she has been primarily working for the police department. When Chief Lowe came on board, one of the things we identified very quickly was the lack of administrative support. So my first stop was to see Chief Ewing, to see if he'll give up any of his person to help with that. And what I got was, we would help all the time, but it means work that we need to have done. So so Nancy and I have been trying to do some of the backfill for Chief Lowe. And when we ended up not hiring a contract assessor that we would contract out to other communities, that full-time assessor admin support person that was vacant at the time that we made that decision. Anyway, I held it vacant to get through the assessor hire process. And when Mike Noble came on board, had a lengthy conversation about what kind of support he thought he would need. He needs a half-time support. So anytime we have tried to hire half-time people, it usually does not work. People, either there's a lot of turnover or the quality of the applicant just isn't the same. So we took that assessing full-time person and split her. So it's 20 hours in community development, backfilling, assessing, and 20 hours next door providing admin support for Chief Lowe and Deputy Chief St. Louis.
So that salary line reflects a full-time employee and a half-time employee.
Yes.
And previously it only reflected a full-time employee, one full-time
Yep,
employee.
and assessing reflected a full-time employee and now reflects a half-time.
Gotcha.
So reading between the lines and not having to read too deeply between the lines of the narrative for public safety administration, it suggests that even that 1.5 person support is not adequate, or will not be adequate for long? Can folks kind of speak to specifics about what needs are not being met currently or where things are falling by the wayside because of the staffing level?
Sure. I think we put that there to raise awareness that we may need to come back and assess that. I think if you look at that position from an admin support perspective, it doesn't encompass everything that I would like to do with that spot. Certainly we need admin support, not only from me and to assist the deputy, but right now the captains are running fleet maintenance, they're running equipment purchase and everything else. When they're off duty, there's really no conduit for that information to flow through. So that person will fill that role as well, at least to collect information. We see that person assisting us with data collection, research for programs, projects, things that are going on within the organization. We would like that person to stand up our social media presence that we don't have right now. And to help manage some of the programs that we have when we talk about fire prevention and those types of things. I think sometimes fire gets looked at as the fire department, but what we just kind of alluded to, there's several different entities that reside under the firehouse. There's hazmat, that there's EMS, but we're also responsible for emergency management. We're responsible for public health, public education. And as systems evolve, we're going to end up taking on more stuff when we expand EMS and look at community partners and those things coming down the line. And having that person there to help us prepare and plan for that is critical to the mission, basically. I think halftime is probably good right now. Could we do more with more? Absolutely. But I think that's a good place to start to make sure that we know what we're doing.
So I will just add that the other moving part in this is an assessor who doesn't know if he will need more than occasional support once the reval is done. So part of my thought in sharing the person now, we went out, we hired somebody who would be, I think, would work well in either department. And so the thought would be in a year or two when the reval process is done, we might very well simply transition this person full-time into. So that's kind of where we, and why the request is made the way it is.
Anyone else have any questions?
I have a question. Again, back to the narrative, but this is another kind of curiosity question where it says areas of discussion, a distribution, inspection, installation center for child safety seats. Additional time is being dedicated weekly to assist the public with car seats. Where does that happen in?
That's
Yeah.
certified.
Right.
Also, the state time had asked if we would become a distribution center for people who don't have.
Okay.
She does both. She will evaluate somebody for the need
Right.
car seat and provide that if they're appropriate. And then she also does a substantial amount of teaching people to install car seats properly.
Okay.
And it literally is weekly that people will come in and ask her. It takes anywhere from half an hour to an hour for her.
So she does it like once a week, installs a car seat.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't even know Orono did this. So is this like the best kept secret, or can we publicize this somewhere? I mean, if she's doing it weekly, I never even knew we had that.
It has been year.
Right, but not weekly. I mean,
Oh, we don't
posted
post it
events,
weekly.
but
No, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. People call and ask to have it done, and she does
Right.
individually for people that
okay,
are aware of the program. We don't
okay.
host. Right, we don't host weekly events. Exactly.
I do see that, but in the narrative it says weekly.
I meant weekly.
That was my question.
I meant weekly. She engages in this activity weekly.
Okay,
There's another draw on her time.
is what you were thinking?
After that.
All right, I was just curious about
I
that.
think the other piece that's important to recognize with the current full-time public safety person is also the backfill for the front office. So she is cross-trained between the two functions, which is what allows us to work with the limited staff that we have down front.
Does the state reimburse anything on that?
No, not the time.
No, but the
And
car
the seats
seats.
are provided to us for free by the state.
Interesting. Anything more on public safety?
Yeah, I'm always kind of looking at salary type things, so I kind of just need a bit of an understanding. So in my mind, I tend to look at like an administrative assistant as kind of an individual who's, for lack of a better words, almost like a lackey, kind of like filling in and helping wherever they need, and they kind of do stuff. In the wording of how you both spoke about how, or more so Sophie spoke about how the wages will increase or whatever. I was trying to figure out and wrap my mind around when you have an administrative assistant that's by next year maybe about $20 an hour, but yet I look at most of your firefighters who have to be EMTs or paramedics are below that individual, and I'm not quite sure why. And could somebody explain that to me?
So in hourly rate, they are. Firefighter paramedics work 56 hours a week, get paid 57 and a half hours a week. And without giving away too much of confidential bargaining, that is the very issue we are seeking to address within.
Because it's obviously it's obvious to me that there is definitely an issue here.
And that might be something, Terry, that you and I might sit down, have a cup of coffee, and I'll walk you through what we talked to the council about in executive session, so that you can know what we know.
Well, and when I started, and this is what Jess has, but when I started here, there was an administrative assistant working. That person, they pseudo run. They keep everybody on track. They keep everything organized. They are access to information. All the information that my department has. They're not use the term lackey like it is a much higher level role than you might think, and that is she would still be at our particular administrative system. Well, she'd actually be below what.
Yeah, I'm
It's actually pretty young.
I think.
I just like as an individual, like thinking about what a typical, when you hear an admin assistant in any typical business or whatever, that's typically somebody who's just kind of like doing this. I didn't mean that individual, right? And
Maybe the title.
right, the title may be a kind of distraction, but the I look at it as like next year the minimum wage with the state of Maine is $12, and we actually have somebody who's at 13. That's really a kind of a disconnect in my mind.
That's a good conversation, just not.
Well, that's in sort of the reason that I want, and thank you for sort of elaborating more on what those positions do, is I wonder sometimes if the public doesn't quite understand why public safety administration has a budget, or if they think of the person as just, they sit at the front desk and answer phones, when I know that it's a more elaborate, in-depth job with a lot of responsibilities. So thanks for speaking to that.
In areas of concern, you mentioned that about when the office is vacant, calls are diverted to the Regional Communication Center. Will adding this half up, making it 1.5 people, and was that going to help with? So it still may be an issue, because we're actually we're at a very low staffing considering all of the work that needs to get done. And then the other was the office spaces in need of an upgrade. Are the proposed upgrades part of this year, or you're just saying that for next year?
That's actually been moved down to maybe FY22. It's been in the works. It's a project that needs to be done. It's just the priority level.
I think I'm all about making spaces as efficient as possible. And so I think it's wonderful for you to put it off thinking, oh, it's expensive, and so we'll have to put that at a future time. But if it's going to make your work, the people who work in your department, more efficient, then it should be something you bring to us to talk about if it can be done incrementally.
So,
Maybe bigger pictures there.
yeah, so I think, Lori, one of the things that's really important to think about is the fact that the capital budget, when you're talking about $20,000 for a rehab of a building, of an office space, and a lot of that rehab has to do with the fact it was dispatch, and when dispatch got done, they just kind of shoved all the wires off to the side, continued doing their work, and it's set up for dispatch as opposed to admin assistant. But there are lots of things that got pushed down the road in the capital budget simply because we don't have money. And when I look at all of the needs, this would be great, but we're functioning. She has a desk, she has an ergonomically correct setup. She can do her work. We elected not to put the part-time admin into that space. Instead, she will spend the majority of her time in an office in the training office into the captain's office, and she will have her own space and come out as needed. But gosh, I could get a lot of stuff done if we didn't have to worry about paying. In this particular case, I think if we had $18,000 appear for this year, I would have other things that I put ahead.
Okay, that's good. I trust your management. I just wanted to also say that if some things get kicked down the road, that you should feel comfortable coming to us and talking about them. So it sounds like you've thought that one through. Thank you very much.
Anything else on the admin? Right. Move on to fire.
Fire. So, my first question is, you talked about the salary adjustments in the department, and I see a 10% increase, and I don't think people are getting 10% more, so maybe you could explain that.
We have for many years been able to, with the operating needs of the hazmat program, we've been able to fund a portion of the fire chief's salary through hazmat. We had to decrease that salary by that went to hazmat by I think $7,000. So that's part of the shift. The other part of the shift is in the scheduled overtime. If you notice a few lines down, Tom, last year we budgeted $61,912 on scheduled overtime, and that's the extra 3 hours a week from 53 to 56. That's overtime by Fair Labor Standards Act. We are trying very hard to simplify the payroll program, and in this particular case, it would simplify it a whole lot to move that scheduled overtime up into full-time salary. So 61,000 of that 81,000 is the just simply moving the scheduled overtime.
Gotcha.
That
And the remainder is made up of the $7,000 decrease from the hazmat and the increase estimated based on the union negotiations.
yes. And so yes, this budget, in previous years, I didn't add money in when we were in negotiations. I learned my lesson last time. This budget does include the 1.7%.
I could keep going. Could we talk a little bit about training wages and training? significant increase in both of those categories, 70% increase in training wages, 55% increase in training.
Sure. So the training wages account for students that will be going to advanced EMT and paramedic school, which is a mandate for them to they have to become paramedics. Part of the package is that that reflects wages for them to attend school while they're not on duty. It also reflects backfill to cover them.
How many people does that involve, Chief?
So right now, I have one student who is in paramedic school, and I have another one that will be starting the advanced EMT program this fall, I believe. Then I think that's it right now.
The full $17,000 also includes.
Oh, it includes any other mandatory training or anything else that we have to go to. So I'm sorry, we have to walk there for a minute. So when we bring back our own in-house instructors to provide programs, it includes a salary to cover those. So, for example, because we require people to be at the paramedic level, they have to have certain certifications. An example of that is advanced cardiac life support, which is a program that we deliver to make sure that the providers give you the right drugs when you're having chest pain or when you're in cardiac arrest. It refreshes their skills and keeps them up to speed. And it's an industry best practice to have people certified for that. If we were to send people to have that program, it would cost us a little over $200 per person for a refresher. And we'll take that and multiply it by 16 people every other year, every 2 years. That's a hefty amount of money. Whereas if I bring an in-house instructor in, which we have sent for training, we now have in-house, we have an adequate number of instructors, it will cost me right around $600 in overtime to provide that program. We're doing that with all of those specialty courses that we're required. So that's the other significant increase there. Mostly paramedic coverage, but certainly coverage for those other programs as well.
So that this requirement, this paramedic requirement, isn't new. We've had this in place for some time. So the significant increases because we have more people who need that training. I'm just having a hard. I understand the training and the importance of training, and I appreciate the explanation, but I have a hard time understanding the increase.
We weren't seeing overlaps in sending people to paramedic school before. We were able to do just about one a year, and now we have overlap because of we're seeing turnover that we haven't seen before, and we are expecting more turnover because we've got a whole tier of. Unfortunately, it feels like it goes in tiers. We've got a whole tier of people that are getting ready to retire. The other piece that the chief is not talking about, and he can table, but one of the things that we recognize and identified when he came on board is in an operation that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, holidays included, when management is not always here, they're out doing the work. There had not been a lot of attention paid to supervisory training, management training. It kind of, I think, the quality of the training that we've found locally is not providing the skill set that we want. So one of the things that the chief has talked about is the ability to send our officers as needed down to Maryland to get some of that executive officer training, which I think is really important. Some of the places where we sit back and scratch our head and say, gee, we could do this differently, I think it comes down to not really understanding their role as an executive officer. So that is the other piece. That's not a huge piece of this $7,000, Tom. That's minor, but it is a training.
It's not a huge piece to that, but it does. I don't mean to jump on you, but that does link to training. So I'll cover some of that too when we
Oh, I see training wages and training kind of going hand in
Right.
hand, because in the fire department, if you send somebody for training, you have to backfill when they're not on shift.
Right, so in total, that's an increase in 13,000 between training wages and training. I would be curious to know more, and I don't know if this is information that you guys have tonight. I'd be curious, because some of what you're talking about seems to be what you alluded to at the beginning, that there were areas where we were cutting costs in this department, that perhaps that was not the wisest place in the municipal government to cut costs. So hearing more about that is great, but also I'd be curious to know of this increase, sort of what the breakdown is between, oh, this is just happenstance that all of a sudden a bunch of people need to be trained at the same time, and what are we making up for? Does that make sense? Like, how much of this is we have to do it anyway, and then how much of it is we really need to increase some of our training?
So I think a good portion of that is stuff that should have already been in-house when I arrived, and that's not to take anything away from any other chief that served before me. But when I came in and looked at the organization as a whole, you all know that one of the biggest risks to any organization or town lies in the human resources realm. That involves simple management of people, to the training of the people when they first come in, to ongoing evaluation and whatnot. So a lot of this training that we're talking about isn't so much training and going out and learning how to spray water or anything like that. It's leadership development. It's supervisory development. It's training our people to be able to train people how to be firefighters, if you will. So there's a fire instructor program that actually certifies our people in-house to be able to deliver that program to new people. Again, meeting a need because there isn't a lot of opportunity in this area. It's kind of, it falls on us. So that's really what a lot of this revolves around, is that institutional hardening, if you will, to defend against some of this risk and make sure that we're treating people fairly and we're assessing them fairly. If we have to discipline, we're following best practice and those types of things. It would seem to somebody without the knowledge or the experience that you could just write a policy and that would be fine. Although you know that there's a lot of nuance and legality and a lot of wiggle room, if you will, around things. And if you don't have it locked down tight when you take on these projects and programs, then yourself up to some trouble. And that's really what we're trying to do is one, deal with some stuff, and two, prevent further problems downstream. So it's in my mind, it's not a nicety for the fire department, although it is professional development for the firefighters. It's more risk management piece for the town.
Could you speak a little bit to any possible relationship between this kind of training and development and retention?
Sure. Yeah, anytime you have a strong training program, number one, that's a retention tool for people. They want to train, they want to learn new things, they want to do things, they want to be active. They like to hear how outside people do things. The other piece for retention is once you get people trained to a point where they are comfortable, and they're comfortable making decisions and doing leadership and management things, it makes the organization go better. There's less a sense of confusion, there's more sense of feeling like you're going in a certain direction. Those things also tend to make people stay with the organization, feel like their efforts are going towards something.
Thank you. I bring that up only to, I'm sure that there are probably plenty of people who think about the ongoing issue of training and then losing staff. So to think about the ways that this kind of training could potentially retain staff is useful.
And I have a question too, as you were talking. So the training wages is more of a professional development, train the trainer kind of
Training
line. Yeah, go ahead.
Training wages would go to some of that.
Okay.
A good portion of that goes to covering paramedics,
Okay,
students.
right.
Some of that training wage will go to this program.
So I'm just trying to, I was listening to you and just kind of thinking, so the wages, the difference between the two the training wages is you're training trainers, basically? No, okay.
No, a training wage is when outside of their regular work week, send somebody off to a training. So there is something beyond the 57 and a half hours they normally get paid. That, and it's related to training, goes to training wages. The other thing that happens is if somebody is on shift and they're just getting paid their regular weekly salary,
Mhm.
and they go to a training for a day, that's usually, depending if it's here or somewhere else, either 12 or 24 hours that we have to backfill
Okay.
on overtime. That's where that hits. Training wage, that's why we have the overtime.
Training itself covers tuition. So
Right.
tuition for the paramedic program, tuition for these other programs. A lot of the other programs are small because they're state-driven.
Right.
The paramedic program is really a very costly endeavor.
And so the difference between training and recertification, just regular certification,
That's training.
that's training. I guess I'm trying to think, I'm listening to you thinking that some of these people will come back with the experience to actually be an instructor. Okay, so that's why I'm thinking it's kind of a train the trainer. So if they are instructors, can they offer courses to offset the training budget? Can
So-
they be our,
We've started that process now in-house with some of the EMS or ambulance service courses, if you will. At some point, once we have enough cadre, we might be able to offer those to outside. But it is right now, we're focusing solely on the inside and trying to, one, build staff confidence, and two, reduce some of that cost associated with sending people out.
I would also say the other reason that it would get stalled to do anything more out of house is if I'm sending somebody away,
Mhm.
now somebody's got to work overtime, whether it's the trainer doing the training or the person coming in to backfill the trainer's regular shift. At this point in time, with the schedule that we're asking people to work, we have so many mandatory overtime shifts that I wouldn't be able to, in good conscience, add a program that would have.
and I just had one more question. Can people do people just volunteer to have this training, or they don't volunteer, they can?
No, they volunteer now. They volunteer for it.
So can anyone in your, can they just go, I'd like some extra training?
Right. I would approve it. I would certainly prioritize, if there was a current leader who needed something and somebody who wasn't needing it, I'd probably prioritize one over the other, at least the first time. But yes, anybody can volunteer. As it is right now, we're not compelling anybody to attend any training other than paramedic, hazmat, and basic firefighter.
Is there any payback on those trainings like there is in the police department?
No. Let me make sure I understand. What you're saying is when we invest all this money and time into training a police officer, if they leave in the first 5 years, there's a graduated payback. Yeah, no. Not for fire, not yet.
I just had a couple of questions. So, do we staff for EMS or do we staff for fire?
I don't think we staff enough if we're staffing for fire. I think we staff the maximum that the town's been able to afford. When you drive around, talk to other fire departments, having 5 people on a shift in a community of 11,000 people is very skinny. And for running 2 ambulances that have a minimum of 2 people out the door in each one of them. And then having multiple dual calls, so both of them gone. I really
But from my observations, it seems like we have far more EMS calls
do.
than we do
Far more.
fighting calls. So,
So EMS drives it, but when you say staffing too, like Public Works, we staff to winter services, and we fill in and work them all year round, but that's where that's how we know what we have in the summer.
Mhm.
Fire, if I asked the chief to staff for the EMS load that we had, I'm gonna guess he would ask for more people. If I asked him to, I've seen his projection need to fight fire, that's more than 5. So I think we're staffing with the maximum that we can.
and we had talked previously about a comprehensive plan. Is any of this going to be affected by that comprehensive plan?
So I'm gonna take. All right. So we came to you talking about the comprehensive plan because it's a really good idea, and the manager's all excited about it. And then I realized that before we can go out the door with our comprehensive planning process, we need to shore up our framework for leadership and supervision in-house. So the comprehensive plan is on the horizon. It's just not as, I wouldn't say we probably would be embarking on it until if this fiscal year coming up. Right now, our fire chief is furiously rewriting policies and training and working on organizational structure so that we can then layer that comp planning process.
I had a brief, question about the areas of concern, because it wasn't totally apparent to me. They're brief. I'll say that. Is there anything, first of all, that you meant by staffing that wasn't covered in sort of what we just discussed? And then hazmat, should we be talking about that at a different time, or it is now okay?
Hazmat budget is next.
Okay, great. But yes, so it just says staffing and hazardous material response team operations. So if we could hear more about what the concerns are that haven't been addressed yet.
Where was that?
The areas of concern in the fire department narrative.
I'm sorry, I apologize. So staffing will probably always be an area of concern for me, just because we're light in staffing, like we talked about. I think when we think about firefighting, or when we think about anything that's business related or town related, we look for, do we have enough staff to fulfill? We shouldn't, or is the volume, do we have enough staff to meet the volume, I guess is the way I would put it. When we look at fighting fires, we can't look at enough staff to fill the volume. We have to look at enough staff to meet the 20 to 20. And that's where, if that makes sense, that's where the disconnect comes in. So I know that for a normal house fire that we have in the town of Orono, we need at least 15 firefighters on the scene. I know that. That's statistically proven data out there. And we don't have that. So that will always be an alarm that I will ring. We rely on our mutual aid partners. We have good mutual aid partners, but just like us, they're seeing an uptick in demand for service as well. And someday something will break and we'll have to I guess that's the only reason I bring that, is to make sure that it stays on the front burner, relevant to you, that it's an issue. And I'm afraid if I stop talking about it, then it will become a non-issue. So, and I don't want to do that. I guess that was the big thing of why we bring staffing forward. So.
Quick question about medical supply increase, 10,000.
Hazmat's coming up.
Yeah. So sticking with fire right now, $10,000 increase for medical supply, 33% increase. That's not a standard increase at all. What's happening there?
So the supply, the medical supplies, medical equipment, medication, stuff like that are all over the place. What the costs are. There's an increase in EpiPens, some of the other medications that we use. And I didn't want to get caught too far behind the 8 ball, if you will, increasing those medications that have come out. Simple salt water bags that we use for IV solutions, we've seen an increase in cost of those. So that's where I ballparked where we were going to go. I don't know for sure that's where we're going to be, but again, I didn't want to cut us short in the planning process, expecting that medical medications are going to increase in cost.
Are there new medicines? I mean, you don't carry Narcan and that sort of thing, but you do.
You do.
And PD as well. Yes. Okay.
Two different types.
2 different delivery methods.
Are there other things coming on? Well, it doesn't really matter. This will take care of making sure we're current with everything.
I had a question about equipment repair and maintenance with a 43% increase. I read the material and I saw that you aren't projecting any significant repair right now. And I also look back at this year's budget and we're right now underspent in that line significantly. This is the budget dated, the financial sheet dated May 20th.
If that's the case, then I've made an error somewhere.
Page 6.
So we've got $85 left in that account.
Oh, am I looking at the wrong account?
I'm looking on page 7, vehicle repairs and maintenance. Is that where you're?
I'm looking at vehicle repairs and maintenance and I'm seeing $14,000 left in that account. $35,000 was what was budgeted. $20,000 is what is spent. $14,000 is what is left. 20.
Yep. Nope. We are. I'm gonna look at that, Tom, because that's not jiving. Let me go back and look, and I'll bring you back information.
I mean, I am giving you the correct figures, am I not?
You're looking at the correct figures, but I'm a little concerned about this report if something got credited instead of debited.
Okay.
The idea would be to stay on trend. So if that is in fact correct, then we would
Make an adjustment.
make an adjustment. Absolutely.
Okay, for me, this is yet again a personnel issue for me. So when I look at what you currently have staff, looking at the hours, is that everything above 40 is considered overtime? Okay, no. So when you're talking about being short-staffed, though, my little quick calculation here, if I look at the numbers of everything over 40 hours, it would be equivalent to about 6 employees. I'm just kind of trying to wrap my head around why do we have 56 hours for an individual as opposed to just adding other employees to kind of help with the...
So, welcome to the fire department. And let me just say, well, I see lots of grins, Terry. Those are good questions. Those are very good questions to ask. In the fire department, we run on a 24-hour shift schedule. So, right now, somebody works 24 on, 2 days off, 24 on again. Then they just rotate that way all year round. It is the least expensive schedule to run in terms of total staffing required to fill that void. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, firefighters, where we're used to 40 hours a week as being a regular work week, because the industry standard is this 24-hour shift schedule, the Fair Labor Standards recognizes 53 hours a week as regular time. And so they don't get overtime until they exceed 53 hours in a week, unless, of course, it's for something that is spoken to in the contract. But, so when we start trying to get this closer to 42, in order to provide the exact same level of service, meaning 5 people ready to go out the door, you are going to add approximately, if you didn't give anybody a weekly wage increase, you're adding approximately $330,000 to the total payroll. You're going to add 3 people and 4 people. Sorry, you've got to add 4 people. So that's why we do it the way. And that would get them down to a 42-hour week.
And I always ask this, now with the new state administration, do we think that there will be more grants for like protective gear or scuba equipment? No, I don't see any.
I will tell you that what I've seen from at the municipal level right now is adding additional programs to be funded as opposed to fully funding existing programs. Even the FEMA assistance to firefighter grants that used to be quite prevalent in the state of Maine 10 years ago, they have pretty much all dried up. And, so I'm not seeing that, and the need throughout the whole state, Cindy, is growing.
I got another one. Could we talk about EMS billing line for a minute? I see the increase of 19% or $4,000, and that fee is based strictly on the number of patients that patients isn't the right word. What do we?
It's the amount that gets collected. It's so, if you want to think about it, it feels a little backwards, but our EMS billing, we have a service that does all of the billing for us. It ensures HIPAA compliance, and it also ensures Medicaid, Medicare compliance, which is really important. They send out bills for free. We don't get charged based on the bills they send out. We instead get charged a percentage of what they collect for us. So if Megan has a service and we send her a bill for $1,000, and Sam has a service and we send him a bill for $1,000, Sam doesn't pay us.
Figures.
Yep. We don't, the town is out the revenue for that, but we also don't have an expense for that bill being sent. We instead would pay $6 for Megan's.
So, so the fee is based on a flat fee
It's a percentage.
or percentage.
6%. 6%.
Okay.
So we're proposing higher revenues this year then.
Yes, I am proposing that, well, no, I'm proposing that the EMS billing for last year doesn't match the revenue number.
But the fees, again, looking at the financial statement, we have only spent 60% of that line.
So when this financial statement was run, we are usually a quarter behind, if not 4 months, in the billing process for that, Tom.
Okay.
And again, that's something that, as you're used to, we go through the budget, and as we get closer to year end, if there are places that we can shift down, we will, but this, I think, was just based upon trends.
I had a question regarding that EMS, and this is just a recent, something that happened recently. Then I was thinking, Glenburn just let their ambulance service go. Is that going to impact Orono at all? Do you think
So,
coming year?
Orono is, Glenburn is a mutual aid partner. If Glenburn had a need and we had an available resource, we would, like we would for any other community, send an ambulance over, bill for it, perhaps get the revenue for it, and send it out. Glenburn, we did have conversations with Glenburn about whether or not the town of Orono could backfill that service. And we all decided that we could not meet Glenburn's service level. They wanted an ambulance housed in Glenburn, and we can't. But they now have a contract with Capital Ambulance, so I wouldn't see any more call for them, as every once in a while we might get called to Bangor, so, for something.
So we've hit the 1 hour mark. So I think we'll move to
Oh, this is fine.
hazmat.
Can we just finish this page,
Sure.
page 21? I usually get questions about fire protection. It's its own little department, and people thinking, wow, $239,000 for fire protection fee, what does that really mean? That is an assessment from both the Orono VZ Water District and the Old Town Water District, because we have hydrants from both communities. It's established by the Public Utilities Commission, and it's based on the need for the water districts to build and maintain a larger system to be able to manage fire flows, as opposed to just potable water for residents to have. So, like I said, it's established by the Public Utilities Commission as part of the district's rate cases that they take to the PUC. The Old Town Water District is increasing their rates effective July 1, 2019. We can thank Superintendent Steve Lane for making it effective at the beginning of our fiscal year. I thought that was very kind. Not doing it at the end of this one when we didn't have any budgeted. So that $3,800 is an assessment that we don't have any choices. Yep. Yep. It is amazing fire suppression water. Yep.
Anything else?
And also under public safety, we look at streetlights. We have this is different than streetlight repairs are for the repairs to the traffic signals that we are responsible for, the parking lot lights that we own, other lights that we might own, and the rentals, until we buy the lights from Amera, we will continue to rent them. So it's different than the electricity bill, it's a rental. Okay?
And when is it that we're going to have those LEDs that we will own?
So we've signed the contract with Tenco, who is administering this project. They are in the final stages of the negotiating the price with Amera. My understanding is it's coming in at or under budget, which is always a thing. We just received notice from Tanco that depending upon the lights that were chosen, the LED lights that were chosen, the tariffs are hitting that industry and causing some budget busting expenses related to the type of light. So we don't think that will impact us, but we need to do some research before we I don't want to go in having said it's going to cost us this and then start the project and find out But the hope, I think, Lori, is to get that all up and done by fall.
So this rental reflects the assumption that it's going to be less than half a year.
No, that's what we did last year.
Oh, okay.
Same, it's actually got an increase just in case, because the rates we're expecting
So if their lights are replaced within this year, then we won't use all of this money.
the lights are replaced within this year, we would probably not use all this money. If the lights were miraculously replaced by the end of June, which is when we take our bond payment, then we would, because if you recall, a significant piece of this project has a debt associated with it that we said at the end of the year, the electricity plus the debt plus the repair costs were going to net about the same. And there was I think a 6-year payback to get us to the point where the debt would.
Is there any way we can get rid of that?
So, can you see if you can, let me see if I can turn it down. If worse comes to worse,
I feel like you're all screaming anyways.
helpful if you guys can continue talking.
We'd be more than happy to.
What would you,
Just right here.
Your mic is buzzing.
Yeah, the buzzing is-
gone. Any sort of activity was making it buzz, so it's not doing it now. There it is. Yikes.
So, talk.
You talk. Can you hear me? Is it over the speakers? It's not buzzing, so I think we're good. Don't move anyone.
Can we try?
Yes, thank you.
Tom, anything for you.
Why'd
So-
you wait so long?
I think Megan's been waiting patiently for hazmat, so.
So with hazmat, I'm just going to remind folks that this budget, the $46,500 budget that is here, is funded entirely from a donation that we get from Penobscot County, which the chief did a great job this year making the argument that we needed more money, which is why this budget was able to go up. Yay. And the University of Maine gives us $7,500 towards this. And then if you look on the financial statements, you see things that say MEMA reimbursable. So we get $15,000 a year set aside at the state because this is a state team. And so when the chief needs new decon suits, he calls the state and says, I need $4,500 of new decon suits. Would you send them my way? And they say, sure, just send us the bill. And we do that and we get it back. We get the money back from them to cover that cost. So $15,000 from the state that is not in this budget. Oftentimes you see that come in piecemeal to council. And then this is the place where when you say, are there grants available? This would be the one area that we probably can, if we can determine specific needs, we can get some assistance. So MEMA gave us separate assistance this year for the vests, the safety vests. 2 years ago, we got separate assistance for 50% of the pickup truck. So that's a hazmat fire pickup truck. So that's how this is designed to not draw more funds from taxpayers. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Which makes sense since it provides a regional service. And I think that the county recognizes that. So and thank you. I was going to ask you to explain all of that so folks at home could know about that. So now we can move right on. So my main question is that in the areas of discussion, one of the things that's mentioned is, that we should at least discuss the staffing level because of increased hazmat obligations to Penobscot County, and also the I think an additional 5,000 for that proposed budget seems to also be tied into training. Both the comments on unscheduled overtime and also just the training line. So what are, and then in the areas of concern, hazardous material response team operations. So what exactly is going on where we're not quite at the level we need to be at, and what does the future hold in that area?
So part of that is as we bring new staff on, we have to send them out for technician level training, which is the highest level training you can get. That's a 40-hour program. And then after that, they are sent to Anniston, Alabama for specialty chemical, biological, nuclear type training. That is all covered. That gets backfilled to us, but there's that upfront cost that is assigned to get them there, cover whatever they need for incidentals, and then again, that's all backfilled. The other piece is anytime you deal with chemicals or explosive devices or terrorist incidents, potential terrorist incidents, it's an evolving field, if you will. There's a lot of stuff that's happening out there. So some of this helps to cover expense with sending people out to New Mexico for bomb school, to other trainings that may come up in state that require funding, those types of things. Again, a lot of that is paid back, but there's that upfront incidental expense that goes with it, or maybe paid in part that we need to match.
I think it's paid in part. I think one of the things that we've found is that the state has been very willing to pay for the initial cost to send somebody somewhere, but not the backfill, which is what we have blown the budget with in the past. The other thing that we're seeing is under that unscheduled overtime, when we bill out a hazmat call, when there's a clear offender or a clear person that has called us with their specific need, we can send a bill, but not to Penobscot County. Just that's the deal, and taking their money every year. What we're finding is that hazmat calls take a long time. They tend to get hit for a callback, and we want that callback expense to show in the right place. If it's for a hazmat call, we don't want it to show in the fire budget, so that we can go back to the county or the state and say, this is costing us way too much money. So part of what we're trying to do is reflect. You'll see an increase in callbacks in the fire department. We're doing more of them. We're getting more of them. And so that's part of that unscheduled overtime. And the training, in order to stay at that level of service that we expect, to have our people be able to respond to this in a safe way so that they can go home at the end of their shift and be healthy. We've determined that we need to train on hazmat once a month, and that incurs additional cost to bring people back, and we want to show that here.
So is it a good thing that we are the regional hazmat?
So
I mean, Old Town was a partner with us at one point in time. They evidently decided it wasn't a good thing and left it.
So I'm going to start this, and the chief can butt in whenever he'd like. There was a time, Tom, when hazmat kind of funded, subsidized other fire department activity. And the city of Old Town decided to leave when the state rules changed and some of that activity could no longer be subsidized. Things like physical exams. So we have to do one every year for everybody. And we were paying for that for the longest time through hazmat. State rules changed and said, no more. You can do an initial exam, you can do one if there was exposure, and you can do one when somebody leaves. A hazmat exam is incredibly expensive. It is not the standard firefighter exam. So when the city of Old Town could no longer use hazmat funds to pay for those physicals and to pay for the things that they wanted to do, they said this isn't worth it anymore, and they got out. The hazmat team started here because of the University of Maine. It was a regional, countywide team long ago. The county didn't want to do it anymore. And the town at that point said, well, the university still needs it. We're getting money from the university. This is an important service, and we need to continue to provide this service. So that is, I think, how it kind of ended up here. We are in a bit of a catbird seat with hazmat in that nobody else in the region wants to do it to such a degree that I think one of the things that's on the plan with Jeff and his team, and quite frankly me, is to look at how do we shore up hazmat and better provide the service so that we can either get personnel in from other places to help us so there's not as much overtime. So if we were hitting a tone and had a hazmat team that was arriving to help us, or we can go back to the county and say, $46,000 isn't doing it. We want this, and as part of this, we'll tell you right up front, it's subsidizing this, this, and this in the fire department. I think now that Jeff is here and has had a year of watching how this works, we are going to be able to build a case, hopefully, to better fund from outside sources this. But for right now, I think we've got a whole crew of people over there that would be just as happy to see the hazmat truck pull out and go back to Augusta. It's a lot of work. But when I think about the service that we are providing and where the backfill for that would come from, the closest hazmat team is Waterville. And right now we're working pretty much exclusively with DEP, the Air National Guard, and Bangor Fire?
No, we're working with, primarily we work with DEP, the Air National Guard, and the Joint Services Civil Support Team, which is a weapons of mass destruction hazardous materials team, run through the two guard bureaus, or run through the guard bureau they're out of Waterville too, I think, Waterville or Augusta, I'm not sure which one.
Is there another hazmat north of us?
North of us is Presque Isle, I think, is the next team.
And then Quebec.
Or New Brunswick somewhere.
And how often is the hazmat team deployed?
So we deployed, I think, 3 times last year for actual real world need to get into suits and operate. And each of those, did I miss one?
I think we had a few car accidents, but that's not
Well,
into suits. So.
No. So we had those 3 that we had to stand up the team, get into suits, bring people back, and those were 4 to 6 hour operations each time we went on those. We assisted Glenburn one night for an unknown substance. We did have a couple car accidents, but they would normally probably be handled by the fire department anyway. But so again, it's not the frequency; it's the resources needed to handle them when they. To go back to your question about staffing, if I can. Thanks. Staffing is a concern. I mean, as it is right now, we do have to strike a recall if we have a hazmat deployment because we need those extra people coming back. But we've started to open the door with some of our other mutual aid partners as to some of the things that they can do to support the team. So there are other functions that can be done at an incident. So when our people go what's called downrange or walk down to wherever the spill is, there's other functions that other fire departments can do. So we're working and having conversation, doing some training with them now. I'll tell you that it's very political. There's a lot of questions about where liability lies when you bring in other agencies, who pays for what, when do they pay for it, those types of things. It's not insurmountable. The Lewiston Auburn team was a collaborative effort between a bunch of different departments, and that was all worked out. So I can see something like that coming here again, I guess. But it's going to take some effort, and we're working on it, I guess is what I can say. I will tell you that your hazmat team here is well known. They are well respected, and they're one of the, I will put them up against anybody, even the southern teams that do more runs than we do as far as capability, even though we are so light staffed.
I think this goes the other way as well, not to chew up all your time, I'm sorry, but here we are carrying the burden of having the hazmat team. And it's not just the university that's at risk of that. I mean, with, Lake Megantic was a great example of like rail service that can happen anywhere. So what's the throwback for us? And I don't want to get off topic, but if we do, God forbid, there is a big incident somewhere off Orono property, whatever, that we have to respond to. I mean, how do we get compensated for that, I guess?
So it depends on the type of deployment it is. If the state deploys us, then we fall under a state asset, and the money, I believe, gets paid back by the state. If we are called and asked to respond to a location, we ask who the spiller is and who will be billed for it, and then we would be compensated that way. We do have some discretion as to whether or not we, in fact, respond to a hazardous materials release.
To answer your question?
I'm glad you're looking into it.
But I do think, Tom, that it could come back that we think we should structure it a different way, or it might come back that we don't know that it's a thing that we should continue doing.
Yep.
Sophie, how much does the university give us for this hazmat team, or to have us
So if
located here?
If you talk to the university, I'm going to guess they're going to tell you they give two different pots of money for hazmat. One is $7,500 a year that is a direct donation to the hazmat fund. So it's a dedicated donation. And the other, when I talk to public safety staff, is $655,431 that they give us every year for everything.
And how many years have they given us $7,500 a year?
As far as I can see, going back, and I think I made it down back into 1990 something, so it hasn't changed all that much.
In how many years?
20.
Is it time for it to change?
I think it is time for a change. Our first goal was to get a significant, so we brought in $8,000 more from the county, which was our first goal. I will admit, when I went to the county, I may have said that the town council would be discussing whether or not they would continue the service if people weren't going to come to the forefront to help support it. I feel like you've given me license to say stuff like that. And I think the university question is probably for a larger discussion, Cheryl, and I think it's about the $655,431 and the $7,500 and the $30,000 increase in sewer bill.
Anything else on hazmat?
No, thank you.
I had a question on the capital budget, but we're at about 725, so I'm willing to go to police and we can come back to the
You want to
capital.
do the capital? We could quickly do that.
I just had, if you could explain the way I read the capital budget. We're putting 120,000 in an ambulance reserve, and we're paying 128,000 for an ambulance.
We are, so then So we're using 120,000 that's already been saved, because we save for 2 years and then we buy. Then we save for 2 years and then we buy. And the idea is to try to keep less of a draw on tax, that kind of crazy. So we have $120,000 in the account right now. The chief is suggesting that we not buy a full brand-new ambulance, but rather a new cab and chassis and remount the existing box, which takes it from $185,000 down to $128,000. So the net cost to tax new money is $8,000.
But it looks, from the way I read the comments, that we're doubling the amount in the reserve. Did I read that wrong? 60, it says fund 60 to 75,000 per year for ambulance purchases.
So, you're funding $60,000 to $75,000 a year into that reserve account.
Mhm.
And then at the end of, on the third year, you're spending that money.
So this year, are we putting in 120,000?
No, you're using 120,000.
Because there's reserve, ambulance reserve, 120,000 for FY 19-20 projected.
That's using it.
And then there's an ambulance FY 19, F 20, 128 that we're also using.
So the top part is revenue, how we're gonna pay for it. The bottom part is what we're gonna expend.
Okay, thank you.
That, I think you curled, I think you didn't have the page curled enough to get the explanation. I'm sorry, Cindy.
That's okay, no problem. So with that, I'm satisfied. We can move on to police now.
Whew. I'm all worn out.
I'm sorry.
So there is a change in the police budget. I'm just gonna tell you what it is. In the police budget payroll, we caught, that we had forgotten about our poor captain. So, I think it's important that the captain make a little more money in the base wage than the sergeant does. And what we discovered was that, we needed to add 51 cents. He hadn't had a raise in 2 years, so we're gonna, he was due for a step, and we just decided to add that in. Josh and I had talked and thought we would do the step next year, but it really makes more sense for him to be making more than the base wage.
So does that change the figure that's
It
here?
does. It changes it to, it adds $1,061 to the
Full-time salary line?
full-time salary line, and it takes the total at the end of the police budget to the total FY20 proposed police budget is $1,509,163.51. A difference of $84,842.51 with a 6% increase for the entire budget.
Gotcha.
So before we get too far into it, if I were you, I'd be sitting here saying, what is up with holiday pay?
Actually, I'm thinking about what is up with full-time salary, which doesn't increase more than $3,000.
Well, that is because, remember I talked about our payroll software not exactly lining up with the way our budget was built? This is one of those places. And if you look at the financial statement, you will catch it every once in a while that we are way overspent in holiday pay and way under in full-time pay. And it's not until I go back in and make a manual adjustment that we bring it back to where it belongs. So we said, instead of having to go through that step of a manual adjustment, let's just change the way we budget. So what this budget does, last year we budgeted for an entire base wage. So the hourly rate times 40 hours a week times 52 weeks a year all got put into full-time salary. And holiday pay, the only thing we put in holiday pay was the extra money that that holiday was going to cost. Our software, it's either a holiday or it's not. And if it's a holiday, it does the regular wage and overtime calculation and takes it from the same line. So instead of fighting software, we are simply suggesting we change the budget. So the total increase, Tom, is $33,000,
Yep.
$34,000,
Gotcha.
which would be, I think, in line with what we had talked about in the process of union negotiation.
Anyone else have any questions?
There's a contracted opportunity for savings of $10,000 in combined main.
So-
I would like to see. There's a light there.
Yeah, I had a question about that too. I mean, how effective is that was my first question before just whipping out the resume.
So
I think that's
this is a collaborative service that the town manages. The school pays us, reimburses us 50% for. That's the way the crossing guard has worked. We had a significant hubbub around the crossing guard 2 years ago, year and a half ago. And one of the first things we did that kind of upset the apple cart is we decided we were going to get rid of this crossing right by town hall because we were getting a lot of near misses here. And in Josh's estimation, Josh and Robert Bjerksa, felt like people were paying more attention to the lights and the things that were happening down as opposed to people crossing here. And we didn't want people, we wanted to eliminate this crosswalk. So when we eliminated this crosswalk, being the person that you hold accountable to save money wherever I can, my first thought was, let's go down to one crossing guard up at Westwood. And that got a lot of pushback from the parents and the school. So we have kept that crossing guard there. That crossing guard really serves no operational purpose other than a body to put a stop paddle up. He is following the lights and he cannot deviate from the lights. If he deviates from the lights, we are in trouble. So can it be eliminated? My whole staff thinks it can be eliminated, but we also know it's a collaboration with the school and it has been a hot button issue. And in this budget, we have just said we'll continue to do things the way we always have. So
Again, it's subjective. You know, you may feel that if your 8-year-old is crossing right there, having that adult in the middle of the intersection with a stop sign is going to protect. It's more likely that someone's going to see and stop for them, but it is subjective.
Well, it's also going to prevent youngsters from crossing against the traffic light.
Right.
And I think it's probably a more important function for that purpose than anything else.
Certainly dual purpose.
Yeah.
I think the other thing it does is people who are going to take a right on red, because when or when it's green, I'm sorry, right when it's green, there was a lot of concern from parents that cars would not yield to the crosswalk, to people coming across that. So if you're coming up from Pine Street and you're taking, and you're walking across the road, you're stepping out just as the other as the Pine Street traffic is looking to take a right.
You also have the ability, though, to change that sequence so that there is a red for everyone.
Yep.
While that time period, that 15 seconds there is for the crossing to take place.
That's what I was going to ask. If we changed the timing of the light and made there, a no turn on red during certain hours of the morning and afternoon, would that solve a lot of
So,
problem? Because
So-
that is the danger. I mean, the children are crossing there, and it's the people who are taking right turns, whether on the red light or on the green light, that are not really looking and to seeing that kids are there. But
So what we had learned from DOT with regard to Westwood is that they were not going to do, you can't take a traffic movement during certain hours of the day on Route 2. They shut that down.
But we could,
Very.
you can lock it up.
But
though.
you can lock it up.
Everybody be locked up for that period of time while the
But-
pedestrians cross.
Understand that right now, those lights are green 90 seconds and going on Route 2, and then green the other way for, I want to say
Far less. But
35 or 40 seconds.
you would extend that
um,
90-second.
So, so it will back people up on the road for a little bit longer. It changes that sequence would
But
get
I'm thinking
time
that
added to it.
the crossing guards already create that time period.
So I would not do both things. I wouldn't inconvenience the bulk of the cars traveling and have a crossing guard there. I would say if we were not going to have a crossing guard there, we would want to lock it up and have an all red sequence and put a no right on red sign there. Which will,
I'm fine with the $10,000 for this right now with this discussion. And also given that the height of the use of that is also when college is in session, we have a lot of students living down at the tough end who maybe are a little bit more loose with their interpretation of some of our traffic laws, including rights on red. I think it's a fair balance to ensure the safety of kids.
Can I say that I cross kids every day at that crosswalk? And you know what the danger is? It's not the lights, it's the parking lot that we have to go through. Because people are pulling out of the parking lot,
Circle K.
Circle K over here, and that is really scary. So the position, so having kids walk through that parking lot on bikes when it's bike riding season, and not the kids that I take, but I have the little ones, but high school kids and everybody, they're riding bikes through there, and cars are coming out of that parking lot, and that's scary because there is no one there.
Yep.
So we have to go through that space, and we have to go through that space where cars are gassing up, and then we stop, and then a person, and I've never seen anyone turn while the kids were in the crosswalk, turn right. People talk about that, but I've never seen it happen, and I've been doing it for 3 years now, and so I just wonder. Every time I go there, and when I looked at this and I went, here's an opportunity for savings of $10,000. I was like, that's not a bad place to cut.
So understand, yes, Josh is absolutely right. There's a savings of 10,000. We get 50% of that back. So I would also dial back revenue by 50%. So it's a savings of 5,000.
But I'm also on camp about not changing something like that. One of the things I did notice was, I don't know who the gentleman that was this year that was down by the school entrance. That guy was constantly, he was dancing, he's doing stuff, but he's also got the mindset to think that even with that, it's only a little short period of time. It's not like it's hours. And I've come into town on many occasions where he'll stop and just get out there and get that traffic out of the school area to get it flowing. And I think that in itself is a huge value to keep everything moving so it doesn't back up for a long time. So
He'll be back.
Yeah.
He'll be back.
That job right there is a $15 an hour job. That's how we got somebody who would do that is,
We get some legislation in Chicago.
yes. Thank you, Ryan Tipping.
may I ask a question about something else?
Yeah, well, the only question, I just wanted to end this. My only question was that if we're having a increase of $6,000, will the RSU increase their share?
So I believe they will. They've been paying their bills all along. So, and that increase actually happened this year when we
They knew that we were
when
going
we
to be
had
paying that
to
higher rate.
increase the rate to get somebody to.
So they'll
to do
probably go to
Westwood.
12.
Okay. The police budget is always very interesting to me because I've noticed a pattern now in my third year that there's always a page about potential cuts that are pretty sizable cuts, but they're always very clearly orchestrated in such a way as to demonstrate why those would be unwise cuts. And generally I agree. What I would like to maybe hear a little bit more about is the police cruiser issue, because I also noticed that the repairs and maintenance budget line increases by $8,000, and the comments suggest that this would be associated with the potential expected repair costs for removing a cruiser. And so it would seem that the trade-off of saving the money on a new cruiser this year would be maybe 5 years worth of extra repairs. So if we could talk a little bit about that balance.
That system was put in place many years ago because of those high cost of high mileage cruisers. So the system of buy one cruiser this year, buy two cruisers next year. Get rid of one, get rid of two. That it evened things out very quickly in that when a cruiser got up around 80,000 miles, because of the use that they've had, even if they're put into a secondary role of the detective or the captain or the chief or a spare, they still end up getting higher. The need for repairs show up. And when those cars need repairs, particularly these newer models, instead of going to the SUVs, the repair is expensive. You know, to see a $2,000 bill or even a $3,000 bill to repair a cruiser is not unusual now. And the cruiser is down. The cost is one thing. Being without that car is almost worse for us. If we have enough people working, or if there's people doing details, or if there's somebody out training and the car is gone, the need to start shuffling cars around, needing to keep them on the road. So there was a need this year. There's every year, but there's a particular need this year to save some money. So rather than buying two cars this year, we would save that $40-something thousand with the expectation that, unlike people in the seats, I have at least one or two other cars that are in the 80,000 plus mile range right now, and I hope to get rid of the one car that's got 100 and another car that's got high 80s, get rid of those too to minimize those risks of it being down and getting high or expensive repairs. So the expectation is I'm probably going to have some more repairs this year. Next year we would jump back into the cycle of two and one. A third car would now be held longer than we would have up in the 80 to 90 to 100,000 mile range. So it's really just to offset what we're probably going to be impacted by. And the $8,000 doesn't reflect the downtime. I hope you understand that downtime for us does impact us as far as the shuffling of cars and in vehicles. So I don't know if that explains anything, but
The other piece of that, Megan, is we've had a pretty routine year. Unfortunately, the cost of repairing vehicles seems to be increasing and not stabilizing. So we are already, as of early May or mid-May, we're $3,400 overspent in vehicle repair and maintenance. So part of that, it's not all 8,000 is because we're keeping an older car. Part of it is the cost of repairing these cars is going up, and unfortunately, we have accidents that happen when you have cruisers out during the nastiest weather when you don't want anybody else out. They slide off the road, they have issues. So we've had some repair, but also systems that used to seem like they were pretty easy to fix are now really complicated and are costing us a lot.
So I feel like we're finding ourselves in a similar position and conversation as discussing the public works budget and talking about the next 3 or 4 years or what's coming down the road. It seems like we have a lot of increases coming up. We have a lot of equipment that needs to be purchased. So on the one hand, I feel if there's any way we could delay or something, a purchase of that size, that would obviously be very beneficial to the taxpayers for this year. My concern is in the next 2 or 3 years in fire and police and public works. I mean, we're seeing some dramatic increases in those projected budgets. So without the expectation of significant relief, it starts to become very concerning.
Anyone else have any questions?
The only other thing I would highlight for you is that we're adding a little bit of money into community policing. That's a $5,000 increase. If I were in your seats, I'd ask me about that. If you, this is where we are trying to buffer that loss of grant revenue for Main Day.
I'll tell you, it's even that 5,000 is not enough.
But my hope is to go to the university and ask them for corresponding 5,000.
And we've added that bike patrol, but.
Yep.
Could you explain how the bike patrol increases the cost?
Well, in the last couple of days, we've actually been able to take somebody that's on shift and let them get on the bike because we have 2 other uniformed officers that are in cars. What I want to be able to do is there's going to be days where we'll have maybe only 1 or 2 officers in cruisers, and I want to be able to bring someone else in and let them jump on the bike for the day. So we have that. It's going to cost extra money. It's going to cost overtime to put that bike out once in a while, but I think the need is there. I will tell you the feedback we're getting already just from riding a trail. They'll run into people on the trails and people will love it because they've never seen an officer out, and they just think that there's a need for it. They've never necessarily felt that they needed the police officer out, but they like seeing that the officers are going out there and checking those trails. So I think that this is a worthwhile overtime cost to do those special details with officers on bikes.
So isn't there a possibility that the officers that would have been in cars would be on bikes, and then you lower the amount of mileage you'd be using per shift?
Yes. So that is a plan that we'll put the bike rack right on the car, take the car to where as close as you can get to a trail, and then put the officer out on the bike and get them out. So yes, there's that option as well, and we will do that as well. But I think there's going to be days where we want officers and cruisers with the ability to do their regular patrol and enforcement and allow for that another officer to be out.
I think one of the things that is important to realize with the police department is, unlike the fire department, they backfill to some degree, but not to a great degree. And especially in the summer time, when quite honestly, that is where we probably spring, summer, and fall, when we have a lot of vacations, at the time when we want to be out on that bike. So I think his thought is, let's see what it looks like to have some extra out there. If the extra isn't netting us the comments or calls, then we'll know we can back it down and do it differently. But I think at this point, when you only have one person running, on duty in the town, or 2 people on duty in the town, you really don't want to take them off duty and out of a car, because if there's any kind of call, we're expecting that other person to back the primary responder up, and I don't want them to be halfway down the Stillwater Trail when a call comes in. So I think Josh is trying really hard to find that blend of service against the constraints of the budget. Yes. Yes.
I'm shocked that workers' comp is down.
That is a function of the when we got the latest workers' comp bill, they are breaking it into different NCCI codes. And we're seeing some huge increases and others decreases. We're netting to about a 4% increase, which sounds right to me. So we like to try to track comp in the specific departments because it's also where we would see if we have issues.
Safety.
So normally, we don't grill you about decreases,
Mhm.
but I was wondering if you could speak a little bit, well, largely for the benefit of people who may not know about our professional accreditations. If we could talk a bit about the transition from CALIA to MLEAP. God, acronym is popular.
So the state of Maine rightfully decided that they wanted to have their own accreditation. Several other states do it. So they put a committee together and really did a nice job of not just mirroring what CALIA does. They went nationally and looked at a lot of other states and how they developed their accreditation programs and developed a unique one for the state of Maine that really meets Maine's needs, Maine's law enforcement's needs. They're able to do that at a much lower, cheaper rate. The yearly fee alone for CALIA is in the $3,700 range, along with other fees when they come to actually do the assessment. Maine is $750. I might have that wrong, maybe $750 for the program and then $500 for the to be a part of the accreditation. So it makes sense, it being so well tailored to the state of Maine's needs for law enforcement, along with the idea of recognizing national best practices. I think that really makes sense for us to move forward with the MLEAP program. So we did pay this year because we're in our second year of accreditation with CALIA. So we paid the second year fee and met the online assessment that they do, kind of a compliance that they check yearly now, with the expectation that MLEAP, the main program, will accept us as accredited because of our CALIA accreditation right now this year, and then we would fall into the 2-year cycle with MLEAP, dropping away from CALIA and saving that close to $4,000 a year.
The expectation is that our commitment to professional development and utilizing best practices will continue. And if we identify places where current CALIA standards are much higher than MLEAP standards, we will enforce the CALIA standard in policy.
And I think the plan is also to allow the council some power in either through policy or through ordinance to dictate certain levels of standards that the police department will always have to meet. Whether Sophie and I leave at some point and someone comes to you and says, I don't think we need to be accredited, you would already have that authority to say, well, our policy says you will remain accredited and, under these types of standards. So it allows you some more say in the matter.
When you look at what's trending across the country as issues in law enforcement agencies, the accreditation process really causes you to be examining your operations and ensuring that you're not falling into those traps. And I think you want us to continue doing that. But I don't think we need to put Josh through the process of having to meet the CALIA administration. I have no doubt the police department can meet the standards. It's the administration for CALIA that is really designed for departments where there'd be a full-time person just doing the administration of CALIA. And MLEAP is recognizing that departments in the state of Maine, even the larger ones, don't have staff to do that level of administration.
That annual fee doesn't even come close to reflecting what it costs us to actually maintain.
I think at some time in the future, it would be interesting for the council to get a overview of the standards with the main accreditation.
I'd be happy to, and I think that the program manager for the state would be happy to come up.
That'd be nice.
If we weren't in any sort of accreditation, we would have 2 years apply and have 2 years to be assessed. we are accredited through CLIA, so Maine will accept our accreditation, and then 2 years from that date, they will come back and need to see our, yeah, right, basically do an on-site assessment of our proofs of all of our standards to make sure that we're still in compliance. So it's a 2-year.
Sounds like a good move.
Any other questions on police? So we're at 7:56. So I don't know if you have any brief manager's update. If you could tell us what we're, I'm sorry, if you could tell us what we're looking at on June 3rd.
Sure. So on June 3rd, I am hoping that we get through everything. So what is left is Parks and Rec, the library, and the end of the manager's budget, along with some miscellaneous accounts, insurances, and contingency, and the others. So I'm hoping we could get through all of that on Monday, and that you will have, I've got some information, there were some questions raised through the process, and I've got some information to get back to you on Monday, so that on Thursday when we meet, you can tell me what I need to change in the budget, because at this point, there has not been much on the way by way of change in the budget. The following Monday, I'm going to stand up and present your budget to the world, and I kind of have to know what you want it to say. So I think it's really important that we not give anybody short shrift, that you go through the whole budget, but that we get through everything on Monday, so that on Thursday you are ready to have a full discussion on what needs to happen in the budget.
One thing that I'm looking at my notes here, that on June 6th, on the Thursday, we should be prepared to review rate increases. And I think that's because, well, there's some information, but also a number of folks were absent from that discussion.
Yes.
And it's something that council as a group should be looking at.
Yes. And that's WPCF, sewer user fee rate increase.
So, Sophie, I watched that show.
Oh, it was good.
It was good, you guys.
We should
moving
sell
around.
advertising.
Yeah. No. But maybe you could, if you could distribute to us what the rate increases would
Oh, sure.
do to
Sure.
the, because I remember it increasing UMaine's cost, but not really. And would you also do the impact of 100 on a average house
An average
There's-
house with a homestead exemption, without a homestead exemption.
for the Thursday?
I
meeting,
can-
or Monday.
Okay, I'll
Actually, what might be more informative is what the RSU did in their recent publication. They did multiple. They did the average house, and they did a
I usually
$270,000 house.
I usually do an average house, something in the 300 range, but then I also usually pick up some of our commercial properties so that you could see, for example, what an increase on somebody out at the tech park would be. So just, I don't normally get up in the middle, but who was not here to get the sewer information? I have it here. So the big one is the impact of the sewer user fee. The small one is the sewer rate study. So that's what I have. That's what I know. I would encourage people to vote next on the 11th.
11th.
Another week.
Yeah.
Another week. But yeah, that's the plan.
That's the update. It's workshop, but I'll take it. All in favor? Thank you.
Yes.